councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is the end of diplomacy. 35 minutes. That's all, Marco.
Good day, good evening, good morning. It is Ryan and Jelena, the Winers East Calling collaboration on solving all of the world's problems with Larry the Shirt Johnson. How are you today?
I'm here with the shirt.
That's right.
Yeah.
There is so much to talk about. Things are moving so quickly, and Larry, last week when you couldn't be with us, President Trump hosted both Ukrainian President Zelensky and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu at the White House. I thought, boy, what a joke setup. An American, an Israeli, and a Ukrainian walk into a bar.
Yeah.
But I don't know about the punchline yet. So,
the punchline for Zelensky and Netanyahu is they didn't get the red carpet treatment. They didn't get the senior administration official out to meet and greet him on the tarmac. So that sends a message that, you know what, you're not that important. Or basically, we don't feel the need to kiss your ass.
Yeah, and I go back and forth, and I appreciate you saying that. I go back and forth. People say, does Israel control the United States, or, who controls what? And obviously there are major influences like we have never seen before. Certainly, everybody wants to point the other way. Oh, it's Russia, it's China, the communists or whomever. But right. In fact, this is the most obvious thing. So here's the thing, though. To me, Larry, the backdrop of everything is what we're seeing in the global financial system, right? And the ticking time bomb. Well, it's not just the U.S. economy. We saw last week ending in South Korea a 44% decline in their markets. We see this wild bailout process, which I want to definitely get your thinking on, in Japan. Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that dollars were not used by Besant, that in fact, they
supposedly euros, right?
Euros, exactly. So, what is your thinking on this in terms of first of all, the global financial collapse? How is that driving the entire strategic situation?
Well, we do not have a normal functioning, let's call it, global market. Anybody that took an introduction to economics class, whether in high school or college, learned some, this theoretical concept of a market, that if you have a large supply of something and a low demand for it, the price of it's going to be low. There's nothing, and then other elements that factor in is, do you need it? It's one thing to price a bottle of water as opposed to pricing a bottle of cognac. You may like to drink cognac, but you don't need it. But by God, you need water, particularly if it's hot. So we expect to see that if there's a shortage of something, that the price of it's going to go up. And if there's an abundance of it, the price will come down. Well, what we're seeing right now is there is a massive shortage of a variety of key commodities, of liquid natural gas. 25% of the world's supply has gone away. Oil, 20% roughly of the world's supply has gone away. Helium, 40% of the world's supply has gone away. 35% of urea and sulfur. Now, those all play, they are critical, let's call them commodities in the whole global economy, with sulfur, urea playing a major role in the production of fertilizer, for an example. The oil obviously is critical for not only gasoline, but more importantly, diesel and aviation fuel. Diesel and aviation fuel sort of drive global economies. Then the helium, anybody that's trying to produce a computer chip needs helium. And so with 40% of the supply of helium gone, all of a sudden the business of making computer chips is becoming far more expensive. And yet, it's like today we're seeing the stock market going, oh man, we're up 600 points. This is great because the price of oil is coming down. The price of future contracts of oil is coming down. And frankly, that's all just bullshit. It's gambling. And it is being driven in a lot of cases by AI models and algorithms. It has nothing to do with what's the actual reality on the ground. And when you get to the actual reality on the ground, the price of a barrel of oil is actually up around, it's not $70 or $75, it's $140 or higher in some places. So there's deliberate deception taking place. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, so that's right. What you just said, and American households have already absorbed somewhere between $755 to $1,300 in additional month costs through the higher fuels, transport, and food prices. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the planners in Iran are absolutely aware of the economic cost and are certainly aware, therefore, of the political cost that the Trump administration is going to have to pay for this invasion coming up in November and maybe beyond, actually.
Which invasion?
Well, the one that we did of Iran. That's what I would say with Israel. Yeah.
But you mean in November?
Yeah, November is going to be the election, right?
Well, okay, so yeah, I got
sorry that
there.
I conflated some things. Yeah.
So the midterm elections are going to play out against this backdrop of the economic reality for people is they are paying more money for fuel, they're paying more money for gasoline, for not for just gasoline but for groceries, and the economy, the U.S. economy, is not as strong as it appears, and as we're, convincing ourselves that it is. Over the weekend, I had a chance to be with Robert Barnes and Rick Barris. Robert Barnes had his conference and talking to Rick, and Rick he's been doing the polling. Let's call it honest polling, where he doesn't. A lot of pollsters these days are told what results they want to have at the end. And so you go out and ask those questions like, so do you enjoy beating your wife? No? Were they loaded questions to get a particular answer? But he's getting the real sort of sense of where people stand politically. And man, Trump has pissed off his base. A lot of people that had voted for him and put their trust in him, they have a flaming case of the red ass.
Larry, isn't President Trump playing six-dimensional chess? Isn't that real? Isn't all of this really and he's got the IRGC. They're starving. They can't pay their army. Yeah. And, he's figured out the Chinese working with the Democrats because the Chinese totally focus on Donald Trump all the time. They don't do anything else. He's exposed the China gate. Isn't that really what he's doing? That's what I have been told by the handful of followers.
This blind following of the king is, he's lucky if he could play pickup sticks. And, if nobody's ever played pickup sticks. You drop all these colored sticks and you try to pick up each one without moving the others. You'd have trouble with that. No, he's painted himself into a corner, particularly with Iran. He doesn't have any good military options. And I just put a piece up at Sonar 21 last night on gallium. So I've been going down some rabbit holes of late. But rabbit hole suggests something that's off the beaten path. But man, this should be on the beaten path. The gallium is a critical ingredient in the defense industry. You can't build radars. You can't build some of these precision missiles without gallium. And how's our gallium production? We haven't produced any for 40 years. Oh, well, where do we get that gallium? Oh, China controls 99% of the world's supply. And so what's our policy? Let's see what we can do to piss off China. Let's threaten China. And then we're shocked and surprised when China turns around and says, screw you. We're not giving you any more gallium or antimonium or any of these rare earth minerals that are critical for making military weapons. Forget about it. So that's where we are right now. So we've been depleting entire classes of weapon systems, and we don't have the critical minerals needed to produce more. So now we basically, in a sense, we've disarmed ourselves. Now, personally, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think disarming us would be a good thing, that we should stop this crap, stop doing what we've been doing and attacking other countries. But for the whole military industrial complex and these campaigns we continue to launch, it's bad news.
Well,
actually,
go ahead,
I'm sorry. I just want
Jump
to add
in.
a little bit. When we're speaking about rare earth minerals, about how they are being applied or processed, because literally rare earths, they are present everywhere in the like Earth's core. But the thing is, how do you extract them, and what are the methods and the processes of how to extract them and to process them into usable form?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key processing. I mean, there's like, I can take you just about 25 miles from my house, Mosaic Mining Company. They mine gypsum, and out of those tailings, what they take out of the earth, and they sort out the gypsum. What's left over in that is filled with rare earth minerals, raw rare earth minerals. Problem is, you got to process that in order to actually extract these particular minerals. And the processing is terribly expensive. And so China is the one that invested in that. China understood early on the importance of supply chain control. And we like to go, oh, they're a communist country. Well, okay, if they're a communist country, they've certainly set the example of what you want to be as an economy. Because by God, they planned the hell out of this. And here's the so for example, we talked about gallium. Well, to produce gallium, you've got to mine a bauxite, aluminum. You got to produce gallium's a byproduct of aluminum production. So we can't just say, okay, we're going to set up a gallium production facility. Oh, no. You're going to have to get back into the aluminum industry, which we have stopped the mining of in this country, essentially. And that's all overseas. So, I mean, these are complex, and the complexity extends, not just to like gallium, it's in the oil industry as well. One of the reasons, again, the American public are misled. They're keeping talking, we got plenty of oil. We're rich. We're exporting all this oil. Yeah, that's true. But what do you refine? 70% of our refineries in the United States are set up to refine sour crude, this high sulfur oil. And we have to import that. We don't drill that naturally. We were getting that from the Persian Gulf, about 10% of our supply. And yeah, we're getting some from Venezuela, and we're getting some from Canada, we're getting some from Mexico, but they don't have some magic wand that they can wave and all of a sudden jack up production 10, 15, 20%. No. So we've even got a shortage here. And then the cutoff of what's coming out of the Persian Gulf, which is primarily sour crude, the high sulfur content, that's the rest of the world, 90%. They're short. And we've only got, and the refineries we built, if we built refineries to handle the sweet crude, yeah, we could have produced aviation fuel and diesel fuel fine, but we didn't do that. So everyone needs to stop pretending that we've done things that we haven't and deal with what is the reality. So we failed to invest in the industry to produce aluminum. We failed to create refineries that would ensure that we can refine what we produce. And we've got, there are structural shortages, and this is all being compounded by, globally, there are about eight maritime choke points. Strait of Hormuz, Bab el-Mandab, Suez Canal, the Bosporus, from the Black Sea going into the Mediterranean, Gibraltar, Malaccan Straits, and then Panama Canal.
Right.
And Panama Canal right now is screwed. Why? They haven't had a lot of rain. And so as lack of rain means the ships that could normally transit parts of Panama can't get through there now because there's not enough water. So we've got now a global disruption of the maritime supply chains, coupled with a global disruption of essential commodities that come out of the Persian Gulf. And people are like, oh, everything's great. It's not great. We're lying to ourselves. Good God, it's ridiculous.
In that vein, there was because this really is this question of, are we going to be a unipolar power? Are we going to fight to hold on to that power? Or are we going to actually recognize that a system of independent sovereign nation states is really the way to go? People call that multipolarity. But in that vein, it seems that the role that China has played on the question of oil and more broadly is contrary to what people in the West think. And there was this film video that was put out. I want to mention it. China quietly saved the world last month. Maybe, Larry, you saw that. But the film basically discussed roughly 100 million barrels a day of oil is consumed. With the war in Iran, basically that created the catastrophe that you're talking about. China has over 1.5 billion barrels of oil in their strategic reserve. All the different nations, ourselves included, have a strategic reserve. We have, 60 days, and a lot of other places have, just basically handful of weeks.
Yeah, we've got less than 60 days, depending.
Right.
The DOE, Department of Energy, came out. I think it was Energy or was it Interior. One of them came out and announced last week that they could draw down the strategic petroleum reserve to 70 million barrels. Oh, wait a second. Before it was 140, and the reason they put that 140 mark up was that most of the storage is in salt caverns. Right. The oil's put in there, and then to pump it out, you have to pump in water. Well, the problem is when you pump in water, that raises the oil to the top, and they're able to extract the oil, but then that water starts degrading the salt caverns, weakens them. And at some point, they become structurally unsafe, and you can't use them anymore. Going down to 70 million barrels per that's going to ruin these caverns. So we're taking out as much as we can right now, trying to again, trying to mitigate price increases to, again, this pretend that, oh, everything's okay. Everything is not okay. And we just continue to bullshit ourselves about this.
But China
Well,
seems to be that they're taking the approach of not letting things spiral out of control. They're taking the mantle of leadership, if you will. Don't you see it that way, or do you see it differently?
Well, they're trying, but it's there's a lot of self-interest in that. China's economy is based depends heavily upon exports to the global South, and so they're trying desperately to keep the global South from imploding. But the reality is China doesn't have enough to prevent the global South from imploding.
Right.
And
Now,
actually, how I see the situation, there are two big, several people in the room, and two of them are heavily suicidal, have heavily
Yeah.
suicidal behavior. It's like U.S. and European Union, because when you joined, Larry, we were discussing like one of the European supermind idea that they should abolish all the oil imports from Russia, despite EU is already in heavy energy crisis. So it's like cutting the water off in the desert. Just because we don't like the water where this water comes from. So it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. But at the same time, and they're so, Russia is often, like to say, is treated like it is heavily uh, ideological. And China is also treated the same way. But the thing is that the West has now become like these old school communists, so to speak, of the Soviet times, that nomenclatura guys who simply see the targets and see no obstacles in achieving the targets. But what they are doing, they are literally destroying the countries, their own countries, their own homes. So it's I don't know, it's strange, so to speak. And now I'm currently in Central Europe, and I'm a bit silent today because temperature outside is plus 40 degrees.
Wow.
Yes, it's something extraordinary, because you open the window and instead of having some gulp of fresh air, you get the wind like from the stove. When you bake something
Right.
in the oven, you open it and there is that heavy push of the air coming out. So something like that is happening in Europe, and instead of helping the farmers here, what EU is apparently trying to do is to buy agricultural goods from Ukraine, because they need to support Ukraine somehow. And as Ukraine cannot export their goods via Black Sea, Europeans will buy all that to support, so to speak. And moreover, they have Mercosur countries with which like our European Commission has signed the agreement that now we will be, instead of growing our own food, we will be importing food from South America, despite we have a big agricultural sector here. So I don't know what's happening and how it all was planned and why, but apparently it's anti-people, first of all.
Well, that's what's crazy about all this. It's not planned. It's people always think that there's a plan behind this, that there's some sort of intelligence. I see no evidence of intelligence. I mean, as you noted at the outset of your comment, Jelena, why would Europe cut itself off from the cheapest supply of gas and oil when its economy, its respective national economies across Europe are dependent upon gas and oil, and then choose to pay much more, 5 to 6, 7 times the price? It just doesn't make sense. And yet that's what they're doing. And as you said, they're committing a form of economic suicide.
Yeah, I think that absolutely that is the key. Everything here that we're discussing is infrastructure, and the thing that makes people say, oh well, 5-year plans, that's somehow totalitarian. But here we are, China, after 15 5-year plans, they can identify everything that they need. They can accomplish tasks. You just said people think everything is planned, and no, it's not planned. But in China, they do plan, and we see the difference in the condition of the life of the average person. Europe is Germany in particular in a tailspin, industrially speaking. Now, let me just go back to something here on the Middle East. I was looking today. There was Turkey, Qatar, and one other country that they were engaged in talks today at a press conference. Diplomatic activity, this is what they were saying, a diplomatic activity throughout the region and beyond has been nonstop over the recent days in an attempt to stave off a further escalation. I think already we know, Larry, the Saudis put pressure on President Trump to not attack again. So there is some move to try and force through this peaceful resolution. But notably, the United States is not being consulted in the process. So that's interesting because that means that the trust in the United States role has largely eroded. And apparently Iran has insisted that Iran and Oman are actually starting to negotiate. Things like that are going on. So what do you see in terms of the United States having just no role in the Middle East in the future?
The U.S. has pissed away its credibility, number one. Trump's constant threats to end of the world and then reverse himself. I was on an interview with Mario Nafal the other day and conjured up for me the image of Julia Roberts and Richard Gere in the movie Runaway Bride. So I had him. He put together his team put together a photo of the head of Donald Trump on Julia Roberts' body, putting on her sneakers, and Richard Gere was replaced with Foreign Minister Arachi. And so every time they get close to the altar, man, Trump runs away. And getting Trump to make a deal that Trump absolutely needs. Right now, the impasse is this. The United States wants to have the nuclear portion, get a nuclear deal up front before anything else, and then it'll supposedly will call off the attack. Iran's position is, hell no. What's going to happen is you're going to comply with the MOU that you signed, a month more now, almost 2 months ago. And in that MOU, you agreed Israel's going to pull out of southern Lebanon. Israel's got to pull out of southern Lebanon. You're going to lift the blockade. You're going to lift the economic sanctions. You're going to unfreeze the assets. And then you're going to acknowledge that we're in control of the Strait of Hormuz. So that's been the impasse. Now, we're told that there are talks underway about, opening the Strait of Hormuz. It's not going to open without the conditions that Iran has laid out. Simple, period. Not complicated. Everybody keeps trying to add all these other things on and pretend that it's much more, it's much more sophisticated. It's much more entailed than that. No, it's not. And the reality is there's nothing the United States can do militarily to stop Iran from controlling the Strait of Hormuz. Nothing.
Yeah, so Jelena and I were talking about some of these things.
Actually, Ryan, I just had the commentary, if you like. I was thinking now and reading the commentaries of what our viewers write. It's actually very bad that the Western bloc, so to speak, opposes itself to multipolar world, because we may find ourselves in a situation when what dumping is, right? So when somebody comes into the market with very cheap product, and when the market is completely free of other competitors, the price of a product skyrockets. This what I'm afraid will happen with Chinese good. Yes, China is good, but I know that people who are in producing machinery here in Europe, and actually cost of frame, like metal frame for the machinery, from China is just 20% less than one of the European production. So if you want to get a quality product, then of course there is a certain procedure applied. There is a certain amount of energy you have to put in. So and minding also transportation costs to Europe, something is really cheaper to produce in Europe. The problem is if say naturally all the competitors on European or American soil simply die out because of foolish policies of the governments, we will just end up again in unipolar world, but the center of the world will be like elsewhere, not in the West, and it will not do like humanity as a whole any good, because if you replace one hegemon with another hegemon, we will never, how to say, get into balanced, more or less balanced state. Of course, like reaching balance is impossible, but we can at least try. And that's why many people in Russia, I like reading comments, and I have friends there, and they comment, and they're always pissed off, like, why is Russia ever trying to negotiate with the United States? Why they're trying at least to, to show Europe that they're ready to talk? Well, that's why, because Russia wants balanced planet, not like we are having one pole and the rest like satellites. This is a topic I wanted to.
Yeah, I think I want to encourage people. We need to start using. I don't like the term multipolar because it's illogical. A polar is two ends. You don't get multiple polars. What we're looking at is multinodal, and that's what Chaz Freeman has described. And I think Chaz is exactly right, because we're looking at nodes. That's more like a central nervous system, like how the brain operates. And in the past, we've had a sort of a unimodal world in which the United States basically was the controlling power. I mean, the system was basically set up to favor and cater to the United States. And as long as everybody was willing to play according to those rules and accept that, that unimodal world worked fine. But through a variety of, external events, such as the special military operation in Ukraine, when Russia launched that in 2022, that unimodal world it's now collapsing. Not threatened with collapse. It is collapsing. And the signs of the collapse are increasing number of countries are recognizing they no longer want to be beholden to or held hostage to the petrodollar. And so that has led both Russia and China through BRICS to begin creating alternative financial mechanisms that fall outside the control of the United States. At the same time, the United States maintained its power because it could sell all these treasury bills that other countries were sometimes coerced into buying or encouraged to buy. And that allowed the United States to continue just deficit spending without having to worry about paying it back. The pace of the spending now, it's out of control. When Donald Trump took office 18 months ago, or now almost 20 months ago, the total debt of the United States was like 37 trillion. Now it's 40 trillion. He's added $3 trillion in 18 months. That is, this is accelerating geometrically. And every war, every time they drop a bomb on Iran and they continue the war in Ukraine, they're simply accelerating the expenditures that the United States cannot afford to make. And it depends upon these other countries buying treasury bills, except like right now with Japan's in a financial crisis. Japan's selling its treasuries. They need to raise money. China stopped buying treasuries. So there's still a few countries out there that will buy them, but the United States is not sitting on a solid financial foundation right now. So the emergence of this new multinodal world that is setting up an alternative financial system and an alternative security system. That's what's being pressed for right now in the Persian Gulf, to come up with a security system that does not include the United States.
Larry, I appreciate you bringing up Chaz Freeman. I met him decades ago in Germany in a long discussion, and I've followed his work for years. And he is one of the few remaining senior statesmen who really it's shocking, his depth of knowledge on so many different cultures. And I believe he was ambassador to Saudi Arabia. But he also is very he understands the U.S.-China relationship. Your point about the nodes, I'm thinking about this, right? The polar world, right? We think of magnets that they repel. In other words, that there's sort of a hostility, whereas the nodal idea to me implies that the potential for cooperation is there, as opposed to some hostile interaction or repulsing operation. And this goes back to the post-war, well, the Bretton Woods is what I think about. Harry Dexter White, FDR, certainly the Russians and other countries, they had a certain idea that the post-world financial system would be to be an engine for investing in nations, developing infrastructure, addressing African development as opposed to the colonial method before that, which was definitely different than the British thinking at that conference. And then what we see is that it didn't last very long. It came under a lot of attack, so that by 1971, we went to this floating exchange rate system where we were decoupling things, and then later the gold. So we have a situation where we have institutions that in name exist, to do what we're talking about, but in function, they don't exist. So it's like we have to go in and do some surgery to the system. And rather, the problem I see is that the United States continues to point outside of our borders at the problems, as opposed to looking internally. Now, I keep wanting to go back to a number of things you've said already here. So in that framework, you were talking a minute ago about the choke points around the world. And I wanted to bring up something Jelena and I were talking about that, wow, my brain exploded. This whole question of the 60,000 Moroccan migrants that invaded Spain, because my initial view of it was completely different than what it appears is actually going on, that this is part of that this is orchestrated.
Well, yeah, it was orchestrated, but even how it's being described, an invasion of Spain? No, it wasn't. This is Spanish colonial territory on Moroccan land that the Spaniards claimed, for Christ's sake. Let's not pretend that they were swimming across the Mediterranean and landing on Spanish shores and actually going into mainland Spain. Not happening. So this is another example of this colonial legacy where the Spaniards feel that they're entitled to this. Nonsense. Hey, let the Moroccans have it. I mean, this was, there is no reason in the world that Spain should have any claim over that territory. None whatsoever.
Well, that may be. There was one thing, though, that I wanted to ask you about in particular, because Morocco is involved in the whole Washington, Israel, now Rabat triangle constructed by the Abraham Accords.
Yeah.
In 2020, President Trump recognized Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara, which apparently used to be part of Spain, that colonial tradition, which is no doubt the case. And then in 2023, Israel recognized Moroccan sovereignty over that period. So while I agree with you in terms of rolling back European sovereignty, when I see people like Netanyahu, Michael Rubin of the American Enterprise Institute. They're saying the same. They're saying the same thing about, oh well, it's Spain, but somehow I dug into this HR 8595, which is the bill that funds the Iran war. That they say in there on page 88, the Spanish-administered cities of Ceuta and Melilla are located in Moroccan territory. So somehow there's something else going on here.
Oh yeah. No, I'm not denying that at all. I mean, yeah, I agree with you fully.
No, I'm asking for understanding because it's confusing.
This was completely orchestrated, and this was seen as a way to weaken Spain. And again, from the Spanish standpoint, they need to this should be just a nothing burger for them. They said, hey, you know what? We shouldn't be there. Let's, guys, you're welcome to have it. Morocco, take it over. But in response to that, Spanish said, but we are going to crack down on this illegal immigration coming into our country. Now, but this was, I guarantee you, this was orchestrated by the CIA and Mossad.
Because that choke point, that's a choke point too, the entrance into the Mediterranean. So if
Gibraltar.
Right. You mentioned that earlier, right? So Hormuz is closed, Bab el-Mandab is closed. It looks like the Suez Canal, it might be in trouble from that standpoint too. So then this would then open the door to Israeli or Saudi, or I don't know what, a way out, so to speak, so that
they're vulnerable. Suez is very vulnerable. Let's put it that way. It hasn't been disrupted yet. It could be. So far, the Houthis are quite capable of disrupting it, but they've chosen not to. They're focused only on any ships coming in from the south, from Bab el-Mandab up towards the Saudi port, or anything coming out of the Saudi port headed south through Bab el-Mandab.
Well, as we discussed, like at home, that actually this operation, whatever, against Spain, of course, Spain should. I'm not an advisor to Spain, but it would be logically, of course, to maybe review agreements on these cities. Of course, nobody wants to give up the territories, but maybe they can negotiate something. So I'm not an advisor, and I'm not in I don't know, into some illegal so to speak, now give the land away and so on. But I think Spain should somehow resolve, first of all, this territorial dispute with Morocco, first of all, and secondly, European Union must come to terms with immigration policy. Because what apparently these people who went into Ceuta, what they were told is that, yeah, guys, you are now on Spanish territory, and you will be granted asylum immediately. And of course, they want, like, we stepped on the soil, we are illegal immigrants, so put us into detention centers, and then we will sit on your welfare benefits. But the thing is that there is not enough money even for locals, not speaking about new people coming in.
Sure.
But what I also read from one Russian specialist, he mentioned also the fact that actually Spain is somehow disappointing the US as well, because it is not very cooperating in the NATO things, and Trump is often disappointed with Spain. And of course, Spain, as far as I understood, it doesn't allow military aircraft to use its territory. So that might also have triggered such problems.
Well, not only that, but I mean, Spain has been adamant about its support for the Palestinian people and against Israel's genocide. And so the Israelis have taken great delight in jerking Spain's chain over this. But the Zionists ought to temper their Schadenfreude right now, because it's likely to blow back on them.
Yeah, and that's the last thing I keep thinking about as far as the Middle East. We're going to go home at some point, Larry. These other countries, they're going to have to live with Iran, and they're going to have to make peace. And Iran has asserted itself, and the Financial Times had an article. They're pushing the U.S. out. They are seizing the initiative as far as everything in the region goes. Now, but the other place that is seizing the initiative is Russia in Ukraine. And I was reading in some of the Ukrainian channels about the very hyped, I mean, there's always hype coming out of Ukraine, but the 40-day operation by Zelensky to force the Kremlin into peace. And it's one thing after the other in terms of Russia striking the gas stations, the rail transport being destabilized, key elements of Ukrainian defense industry just being crippled.
Yeah.
And now Kubela, the former defense minister of Ukraine, even he said, when the air raid sirens come on with those Russian ballistic missiles, we have no air defense. So just hide.
Yeah, but what Ukraine does, I'm sorry, I just wanted to add a little bit, Ryan. But what Ukraine does instead of attacking military targets that they apparently cannot reach, that's attacking civilian populations, buses with children going from Belarus to seashore.
Exactly.
My friend, she recently, she lives in Rostov-on-Don, and she wanted to visit Mariupol. She said, I'm actually not very willing to go because it might be dangerous.
Yeah.
So people in general are speaking that civilians are under threat. And these attacks on wildberries, this is like Russian Amazon. They have two, Ozon and wildberries. And warehouses of both companies, mostly it's wildberries, are being attacked by Ukrainian drones. And Tatiana Kim, she is the owner of Russian business. She was even added to Ukrainian Mirotvorets kill list for supporting Russia. I was like, Russian businessman, businesswoman supporting Russia is now, what was she supposed to say? That she supports Ukraine or what? So what they literally switched to is terroristic warfare against civilians. This is what they're doing.
Yeah. But they're not winning at all. That's the problem. Ukraine has accelerated its defeat. But look, people forget that Russia fought a 10-year terrorist war against the Chechens, Western financed, using outside jihadist elements that went in and were killing Muslims in Chechnya. And it was a brutal campaign, and there were a lot of civilians that got killed. But it took Russia 10 years. Russia didn't collapse over that. And they learned some hard lessons out of that. So now the fact that the Ukrainians are in this desperation mode trying to attack these civilian targets because they can't stop the military side, so they're going to try to use terrorism. And the problem is it backfires. Instead of they think this will alienate the population and turn them against Putin. I get it. I mean, if I read one more piece of nonsense out of Western analysts, oh boy, this is going to force Putin from office. What the hell do they think's going to happen? Let's assume Putin is forced from office. Who replaces him? Dmitry Medvedev? Now, I like Medvedev myself, but he's a hard ass. And he's a little bit more of what I call the emotional Russian, he's not going to temper it. He's a lawyer as well, but Putin makes much more of a lawyerly approach to this. It doesn't get excited, doesn't get rattled. But Medvedev, they'll nuke the UK and France and Germany. And then dare the United States, anybody else, you want to do something about it? Come on. We're fed up with this. We're ready to take you on. That's where it could go to.
Or actually, I think we have once reviewed that question. I'm not guaranteeing that I'm saying 100% true, but as far as I know, per constitution, Putin will be replaced by Valentina Ivanovna Matvienko and Prime Minister Mishustin. They are very pragmatic people. So I think that Putin, who has maybe some good relation to Germany because he served there, and he's very liberal. He is like in a good way liberal. But these people who are behind Putin, they are not like that, and it will result in much bigger problems for European Union.
Oh
First
yeah,
of all,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
what they don't understand. And
yeah.
one more point, I have one friend. She's like a barometer to me. She is like deeply religious person. She believes in God, and all through all these years, she was saying yes, but we must somehow talk to Ukrainians, and they cannot be all bad. And all of a sudden, yesterday, she like brought a post with screenshots from Ukrainian channels, where Ukrainian people are actually celebrating that there was a strike on Gelendzhik. It is a sea resort city in Russia, where 7 people were killed and more than 40 were injured, and people in Ukraine are celebrating that Russian civilians are killed, and she's like asking everyone like, how is it possible? What is happening? So instead of scaring Russians and turning them against Putin, they're turning those Russians who were more pro-dialogue against Ukraine and against ordinary Ukrainians. This is what is now happening.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is. Look, there's no military. The only military strategy that's working here is the Russian strategy. They are depleting the United States. They are depleting NATO. They've depleted Ukraine. And it's not like all the United States has to do is make a decision. Oh, we've got to start devoting resources to this. We'll turn this around. Can't happen. Not going to happen. Because of not just for the United States, but for Europe. They require the rare earth minerals. I mean, Jesus Christ. I don't know what it takes to drive this into people's heads. That it's not just a matter, oh, we're going to decide to spend more money to produce more weapons. You're not going to produce them. So stop lying to yourselves.
You know, I was debating somebody, and he actually, it's one of my neighbors. He said, well, isn't Russia still a communist country?
Yeah, my God. Yeah, it's just that kind of stupidity. There's it is. But it's this Western propaganda model. We've got to create a narrative and pursue that narrative in order to rally public support.
And what about like this, increased funding? I always find it really amusing because people have somehow, computer strategy game mentality, like in StarCraft, who maybe somebody still remembers this game, from Blizzard. It's the first, like one of the first strategy games, and there you can just type in cheats like give me the show me the money and operation qual and everything, like you got unlimited money and everything was like printed out, units were made and all the aircraft and so on. But it doesn't work like that in the real life. That's why when people say, yeah, funding for Ukraine is increased, and I said, okay, funding is increased, but how you're going to produce all that? That's the question. And how much for that money, providing the price per unit that is also increased.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's the economic realities are going to force policy changes ultimately. The ability to keep pretending and pushing it down the road, that's going to come to an end. I don't know when. I'm surprised the lies and facade and this false facade has lasted so long, but it's going to come to an end. It cannot continue. Historically, just doesn't continue, but we'll see.
Well, thank you, Larry. I think the options now at least have improved for us. It's either nuclear war or countries like, as VK Tula Z says in Twitch, countries getting pulled in to be used by European oligarch powers to foment more just perpetual war, or, as you said, this multinodal directionality where cooperation as opposed to confrontation, mutual benefit. There was a Treaty of Westphalia, I think, 1648, right, that said we're going to eliminate the idea of vengeance and put on the table building relationships that actually improve our citizens. And I think you hit that home with this multinodal concept. That's something I think bears lots of thinking.
Yep. So we'll just, I'm sure we'll have something to talk about next week.
Yes, very much so. Thank you very much for your time, Larry.
Hey guys, always an honor. I am very, very appreciative that you think I'm worth talking to, and we'll see you again.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. You take care,
Yeah,
Larry.
Okay.
And quick question: when
Yeah.
are you going to? Are we allowed to bring up when you're?
Not yet.
Okay. That's good. Well,
Okay.
can't wait. All right, take care, Larry.
All
Thank
righty.
you.
Later.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye bye.
All right,
Yeah.
that was a fast
That was
hour.
quick. Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you put up Vedran's statement: politics is always delayed because of ongoing projects in the industry. The tax revenue keeps coming in, although the books for future projects are already empty. Well, that's the way we think, at least in the West, but we're behind the times.
Well, Ryan, it's always like normal. I was brought up and I built my career in banking as a part of normal human logic. You do something, you based on previous experience, and you plan ahead. Like at least if you don't plan ahead for a couple of years at least, then you're not planning at all. And in terms of state, I think they must be planning for decades, or like Soviet Union had this five-year plan. And
Yeah.
at least you must see, like, within 50 years time we need to achieve this and this, and at least you know where are you turning into, like
Yeah.
in which direction you are going. But Europe, what scope 2036, we are going to fight Russia. But it's
With
it's
how?
not the
How?
goal.
With sticks?
Yeah, sticks and stones. Yeah,
Sticks. I mean,
apparently.
but just to put a fine point on this, people hear this question of planning in the United States in particular, and they're brainwashed. Oh, that's communist. We don't want that. We want freedom. But let me just say that there is an American corollary to this. I was in a discussion with Alex Craner this week, and Alex Craner, and he brought up again this concept of the American system of economics from Alexander Hamilton, and how we had planned canals, we had planned waterway transportation. Later, Henry Wallace, who was supposed to be the president after Franklin Roosevelt, he had written a book called 60 Million Jobs. And he talked about this question of how you form and plan a rapidly growing nation. And he pointed to Alexander Hamilton in that book. He said that it takes basically an ounce of government stimulation or participation in the economy to then stimulate all of the private businesses and so forth in the rest of the economy. So he said that kind of, if you want the vigor of a private economy, you still need the government to come in there and kind of plant the seeds, prepare the soil. And I said to Alex, I said, I only see this really in China. I do see Russia doing things along these lines. And I think that as Russia and China continue to collaborate, because it is collaboration, and now Iran in a very big way, maybe more India, maybe Pakistan, maybe India and Pakistan will finally come to a different framework of thinking. Then this is going to be permeating throughout more of the world. I know that African nations are interested. So it's like the United States needs to wake up. 250 years ago, you were on the side of the quote unquote global South, the revolution against empire. Time to go back to that. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I also see it the same way, actually, because when people say, planning is bad, actually planning is not bad, and sometimes limiting the appetites of the richest people, it's not that bad. I don't say that, now we must come with them, with these bags and take away everything that they have. No, but they must know the limits, and they must never be integrated within power circles. This is actually what is Russia quite often accused of. They say, Russian oligarchs.
Exactly.
But what I want to stay here, there are no oligarchs in Russia. Yes, there are rich people. There are people who own a lot, but they are not like in times of Yeltsin, Like when Abramovich or
Right.
Gusinsky could open up a door of Yeltsin's cabinet with a foot and say, and now you are going to do this. No, nothing like that happens in Russia. And this what must be limited also in the West.
You know,
Never
Jelena,
allow
I think we
weak-
got to make this point. I think this
Yes.
we have to make this point because there is a whole brainwashing about exactly this thing that you've just said about the oligarchs. And we're the ones that have oligarchs.
Yes.
And they're in London, they're in Wall Street. So this is the structures that that's actually the enemy. In fact, I think Donald Trump, you know, I voted for him. We had wanted, you know, him to do what he had said he was going to do, which was essentially overthrow these oligarchs here. So it shows you to the degree that the office of the presidency itself is vulnerable to attack. And so it's more than just voting. It's people actually have to get in and fight the right enemy. Trump, you know, had, I think, if you think about when he went to North Korea, very good intentions. But, you know, those oligarchs, they say, well, it'll, you know, to hell with that. We're not going to let you go and reach across the wall and make those arrangements. So anyhow, really good talking with you, Jelena, and
Yeah,
hopefully
same here.
it cools off in Central Europe. Maybe
Yeah.
those European governments will start to pass out air conditioners to people rather than thinking about building more missiles for Ukraine.
Oh, yeah.
Same here too, by the way. So, and to our audience, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
We'll
you,
see you
guys.
next week.
Yeah. Bye-bye, everyone.